Two New York City detectives, badge numbers, service weapons, and a direct line to the most violent underboss the American Mafia ever produced. His name was Anthony Casso. And when the FBI finally discovered what he'd been doing with those cops, they realized the entire criminal justice system had been compromised for over a decade. This is a story of Gaspipe, the man who turned paranoia into power, and power into his own destruction. Brooklyn, 1960s. Anthony Salvatore Casso grew up in South Brooklyn, the youngest of three children born to Michael and Margaret Casso. His father sold gas pipes for a living. It was an honest trade, but the neighborhood wasn't honest, and neither was young Anthony. The streets of South Brooklyn were controlled by the Lucchese crime family, one of New York's 5 families. Casso's godfather was a made man in the Genovese family. Crime wasn't just around him. It was in his blood. By 16, Casso had dropped out of school. He worked the docks with his father, unloading cargo alongside longshoremen who doubled as muscle for the mob. But Casso wasn't interested in heavy lifting. He was interested in power. He joined the South Brooklyn Boys, a street gang known for extreme violence. In 1958, he was arrested after a brawl with a rival Irish gang. His father visited him at the police station, trying to scare him straight. It didn't work. Casso had already caught the attention of Christopher Fornari, a rising star in the Lucchese family. Fornari saw something in the young man, something cold, something useful. He brought Casso into his crew, the 19th Hole crew, and put him to work as an enforcer, loan sharking, gambling, drug dealing. And when someone didn't pay, Casso made sure they regretted it. But it wasn't just about money. Casso enjoyed the violence. He was a crack shot, practicing for hours on rooftops in Brooklyn. He even made money shooting hawks for pigeon keepers. Precision, control, lethality. In 1961, Casso was arrested for attempted murder. The victim refused to identify him. The case was dropped. It was the first time Anthony Casso got away with something he absolutely did. It would not be the last. By the early 1970s, Casso had become one of Fornari's most trusted enforcers. He partnered with another young mobster named Victor Muso. The two were inseparable. They ran burglaries, executed hits, and eliminated informants with surgical precision. In 1974, at age 32, Anthony Casso was made. He became a full member of the Lucchese crime family, and his body count began to rise. One of his earliest victims was Michael Gianco, a young associate later nicknamed Spider. The murder was brutal and pointless, the kind of killing that made even hardened mobsters uncomfortable. Years later, the killing would be immortalized in the film Goodfellas. But for Casso, it was just another Tuesday. He didn't feel remorse. He didn't feel guilt. He felt nothing. And that made him the perfect killer. Between 1974 and 1985, Casso and Muso climbed the ranks together. They led a burglary ring called the Bypass Gang, which included expert locksmiths and alarm specialists. They hit banks, jewelry stores, and safety deposit boxes all over New York and Long Island. Authorities estimated the gang stole over $100 million. But for Casso, theft was just a side hustle. His real talent was murder. He confessed to at least 36 killings, though many believe the real number was closer to 100. He had a rule: no witnesses. Ever. If this story already sounds insane, hit subscribe, because it gets darker. In December 1985, everything changed. Frank DeCicco, a captain in the Gambino crime family, approached Casso with a plan. John Gotti and his crew were planning to kill Gambino boss Paul Castellano without permission from the commission, the ruling body of the 5 families. DeCicco wanted Lucchese support. According to Sammy Gravano, another conspirator, Casso gave his unconditional backing. But Casso later claimed he warned DeCicco that killing the boss without permission was a death sentence for everyone involved. DeCicco ignored him. On December 16, 1985, Paul Castellano was gunned down outside Spark Steakhouse in Manhattan. John Gotti became the new boss of the Gambino family, and the commission was furious. Lucchese boss Anthony Corallo and Genovese boss Vincent Gigani decided that Gotti, DeCicco, and every conspirator involved had to die. They gave the contract to Muso and Casso. Casso didn't hesitate. He obtained a car bomb, a weapon rarely used by New York mobsters but common among Sicilian mafiosi. The plan was to kill both Gotti and DeCicco in one explosion and make it look like a Sicilian hit. On April 13, 1986, Casso's crew planted the bomb in DeCicco's car outside a social club in Brooklyn. Gotti was supposed to be with him, but at the last minute, Gotti canceled. The bomb detonated. Frank DeCicco was blown apart. An innocent bystander was injured, but John Gotti walked away untouched. The failed hit had consequences. Gotti was now on high alert. The Gambino family fortified their defenses, and Casso became obsessed with finishing the job. But he needed an edge, something no other mobster had. So he did something unprecedented. He recruited 2 detectives from the New York City Police Department. Their names were Louis Ippolito and Stephen Caracappa, and they were about to become the most corrupt cops in American history. Ippolito came from a mob family. His father, uncle, and cousin were all Gambino associates or made men. Despite this, he joined the NYPD in 1969, lying on his application about his family ties. He rose to detective in 1977 and earned a reputation as a tough, effective cop. In 1983, he was investigated for passing intelligence reports to mobster Rosario Gambino. He was cleared, but the suspicion never went away. Ippolito even wrote a book in 1992 called Mafia Cop, in which he claimed to be an honest officer fighting against his family's legacy. It was a lie. Stephen Caracappa was different. He had no known mob connections. He worked in the NYPD's Organized Crime Homicide Unit, one of the most sensitive positions in the department. He had access to confidential informant lists, wiretap information, and active investigations. He was a perfect mole. In 1985, Casso approached both men through an intermediary, a businessman named Burton Kaplan. The offer was simple, for $1,000 a month, plus bonuses for special jobs. In exchange, Ippolito and Caracappa would feed Casso classified intelligence and, when necessary, commit murder. Both cops accepted. The first test came in 1986. James Heidel, a Gambino associate, had been involved in a failed hit on Casso's life. Casso wanted revenge. He gave the contract to his 2 detectives. Caracappa and Ippolito pulled Heidel over in an unmarked police car, flashed their badges, and told him he was under arrest. Heidel got in the car. He was never seen again. According to Casso, he personally tortured and killed Heidel in the basement of a mob-controlled building. The body was never found. For the next several years, the Mafia Cops were unstoppable. They murdered Bruno Facciolo, a Lucchese soldier Casso suspected of being an informant. A canary was stuffed in his mouth as a warning to other rats. They killed Eddie Lino, a Gambino captain, pulling him over on the Belt Parkway and shooting him 9 times. They kidnapped and murdered Israel Greenwald, a diamond dealer who had testified against the mob. They handed over the names of confidential informants, many of whom were subsequently killed. And through it all, no one suspected a thing. Because who investigates the investigators? Before I reveal what happened next, drop a comment. Do you think cops on the mob payroll still exist today? By 1991, Anthony Casso was at the height of his power. Boss Vic Amuso had been indicted in the Windows case, a massive racketeering scheme involving New York's construction industry. Facing life in prison, Amuso went into hiding. He left Casso in charge. Casso became the acting boss of the Lucchese family, and his paranoia went into overdrive. Casso believed everyone was a potential informant. He ordered the murder of Peter Chiodo, a longtime friend and captain in the family, simply because Chiodo had pleaded guilty without asking permission. On May 8, 1991, 2 gunmen ambushed Chiodo at a gas station in Staten Island, shooting him 12 times. But Chiodo survived. His obesity, doctors said, saved his life. None of the bullets hit a vital organ. Casso's response was immediate, and it was unforgivable. He sent a message through Chiodo's lawyer. If Chiodo testified, his wife would be killed. It was a blatant violation of mafia rules. You don't kill the families of made men, ever. But Casso didn't care about rules anymore. He cared about control. Peter Chiodo flipped. He entered witness protection and became a government informant. And he wasn't the only one. Alphonse Darko, the acting boss Casso had installed to manage day-to-day operations, grew convinced that Casso was planning to kill him too. In September 1991, Darko walked into an FBI office and surrendered. Within weeks, two of Casso's top men were cooperating with federal prosecutors. His empire was collapsing, but Casso still had one advantage: his crystal ball. That's what he called his secret source inside law enforcement. Thanks to Ippolito and Caracappa, Casso knew about active investigations, pending indictments, and confidential informants before anyone else. In January 1991, his crystal ball warned him that an indictment was coming. Casso went into hiding. For 2 years, he lived in safe houses across Brooklyn and New Jersey, running the family from the shadows. He continued ordering hits. He continued collecting money. And he continued believing he was untouchable. But technology was catching up. In 1993, investigators from the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office began using cell phone tracking to locate fugitives. They traced calls made by Frank Lastarino, Casso's consigliere, to a location near Bud Lake, New Jersey. The FBI obtained a wiretap, and they heard Casso's voice. On January 19, 1993, federal agents surrounded a house in Mount Olive, New Jersey. Anthony Casso was arrested as he stepped out of the shower. Inside the house, agents found a rifle, $340,000 in cash, and stacks of paperwork detailing the inner workings of the Lucchese family. There were monthly profit reports, lists of proposed made men disguised as wedding guests, and FBI reports that had been leaked by his lawyers. But the most valuable evidence wasn't in the house. It was in Casso's head. Facing life in prison, Casso made a decision that shocked the mafia world. He became an informant. In 1994, he was moved to the Valachi Suite, a special debriefing facility at a federal prison in Texas. Named after Joe Valachi, the first made man to publicly testify about the mafia, the suite was reserved for the highest value cooperators. And Casso had information no one else did. In his first session, Casso joked with agents. "Every time I stepped out of the house, I committed a crime. You expect me to remember all of them?" But when they pressed him about his crystal ball, Casso dropped a bombshell. Two NYPD detectives, Louis Ippolito and Stephen Caracappa, had been on his payroll for nearly a decade. They had committed at least 8 murders under his orders. They had leaked the names of informants. They had compromised dozens of federal investigations. And they were still active in law enforcement. Federal prosecutors flew to Texas to hear more. Casso confessed to 70 crimes, including 15 murders. He named scores of mobsters, corrupt union officials, and crooked businessmen. He admitted to plotting the assassination of a federal judge and sending hitmen to a prosecutor's home. He described in detail how he had buried a young drug dealer alive in the Florida Everglades, laughing as he recounted the story. And that's when prosecutors realized they had a problem. Anthony Casso was too evil to put on the stand. During debriefing, Casso failed a polygraph test. He lied about how much money he had hidden. He fabricated stories to incriminate personal enemies. He denied involvement in the murder of Peter Chiodo's uncle and the arson attack on Chiodo's elderly grandmother, despite overwhelming evidence. Prosecutors Charles Rose and Gregory O'Connell concluded that no jury would believe him. His testimony would be too easy to discredit. So they made a decision. They would accept his guilty plea, but they would never use him as a witness. On March 1st, 1994, Casso pleaded guilty to 70 crimes. He was placed in witness protection and given a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation. But in 1997, prosecutors accused him of multiple infractions while in custody. He had bribed guards, assaulted other inmates, and made false statements about Sammy Gravano and Alphonse Darko. In 1998, Casso became the first and only mobster ever expelled from the Federal Witness Protection Program. On July 1998, Judge Frederick Block sentenced him to 455 years in prison, without the possibility of parole. It was the maximum sentence allowed under federal guidelines. Casso later told reporters that before cooperating, he had been offered a deal that would have allowed parole after 22 years. "I helped them and I get life without parole," he said. This is really a joke. So what's more insane? The crimes or the betrayals? Comment below. For 12 years, the Mafia Cops remained free. Eppolito and Casso had retired to Las Vegas in the mid-1990s. Eppolito sold cars and acted in small movie roles, including a bit part in Goodfellas. Casso worked as a corrections officer. They thought they had gotten away with it. But in 2004, Burton Kaplan, the middleman who had connected Casso to the detectives, agreed to testify. On March 9, 2005, federal agents arrested Eppolito and Casso in Las Vegas. They were charged with racketeering, murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. The trial began in 2006. Kaplan testified for 2 days, detailing every murder, every payoff, every leak. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On April 6, 2006, both men were found guilty on all counts. At sentencing, Louis Eppolito stood before the judge and proclaimed his innocence. "The federal government can take my life," he said, "but they can't take my soul. They can't take my pride. I was a hard-working cop. I never hurt anybody." Judge Jack Weinstein sentenced Eppolito to life plus 100 years. Casso received life plus 80 years. Each was fined over $4 million. Stephen Casso died in federal prison on April 8, 2017, from cancer. He was 74. Louis Eppolito died on November 3, 2019, in federal custody. He was 71. Neither man ever admitted guilt. And Anthony Casso? He spent his final years at USP Tucson, a high-security federal prison in Arizona. He suffered from prostate cancer, kidney disease, and lung damage from decades of smoking. In 2006, he wrote a letter to his biographer expressing regret. "I am truly regretful for my decision to cooperate with the government," he wrote. "It was against all my beliefs and upbringing. I have disgraced my family heritage. I surely hate myself day after day." On November 5, 2020, Casso tested positive for COVID-19. He was placed in medical isolation. His condition deteriorated rapidly. On November 17th, he was put on a ventilator. His lawyers requested compassionate release. The motion was denied. On December 15th, 2020, at the age of 78, Anthony Gaspipe Casso died alone in a prison hospital. No mobsters attended his funeral. No family members spoke publicly. The man who trusted no one ended up trusted by no one. Not the Mafia, not the FBI, not even his own family. But his legacy remains. The Mafia Cops scandal exposed the darkest vulnerability in American law enforcement. The people sworn to uphold justice had become executioners for the mob. And the man who orchestrated it all, the most ruthless underboss the Mafia ever produced, died the same way he lived. Alone, paranoid, and utterly unrepentant. What do you think? Criminal mastermind or paranoid psychopath who destroyed himself? Drop your verdict below. And if you want next week's case, hit subscribe. Because next time, we're covering the mobster who faked his own death and lived free for 30 years. Or did he? You'll have to watch to find out.